Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Autobiology, the podcast with me, your host, Jennifer Littlefleck. Today, I have with me Kashif Khan from the DNA company. He is the CEO of the DNA company, and I had the opportunity to meet Kashif at Dave Asprey's biohacking conference earlier this year, where at the time I was there, I gave him a sample of my DNA, and we are here to talk about it today, along with helping to educate you on the importance of really understanding your own biology. And, I had mentioned to you, Kashif, offline that, this is really serendipitous for me because my podcast is called Autobiology because mostly I want people to really pay attention to their own body and understanding what may work for one person won't work for somebody else. And that couldn't be more true with what your mission is in getting people to identify, what their, potential, health issues might be in the future based on not only their genetics, but what are they doing in their daily lives that can either help or hurt them? So welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here. And it was great meeting you that day.
Yeah, it was a fun, it was a great lecture that you were in. And I have to be honest with you, I've probably told those stories that you told like 25 times since the conference because they were so powerful. So maybe after we go through my report, you can share with us some of those other examples, that you had shared at the conference.
Sure. So in general, we spoke about it that day, but what we believe is that genetics, the whole science of genetics became that, like genetics, meaning what does this gene mean? What does this gene mean? What is it? That's not the way the human body works, which you know very well. And so our mission, just to explain a little bit more, is to understand, well, how does genetics mirror the body and actually, how do we actually decode this instruction manual we have inside of us, as opposed to finding a gene that causes a disease, which is a very small part of what genetics do. And we'll dive right in. Like we'll go through your results to sort of use you as a guinea pig and explain how that works, right?
I am a little scared. So I'm not going to lie, but you know what? This is a great educational moment. I think for a lot of people, and so I'm definitely happy to be a guinea pig.
Awesome. So we'll start with your brain, which, off the bat so far, brain seems good. I've spoken to a few times, right?
Yes.
Well, what we're going to talk about is the neurochemicals, meaning all of these things that people are concerned with that are so hard to measure and grade, like anxiety, depression, addiction, irritability, procrastination, that you think are like personality traits, but really are hardwire in how do you process neurochemicals. And when we look at you, the one thing that pokes out is that your dopamine receptors, you have the absolute maximum binding capability. So dopamine is a chemical that allows you to experience pleasure or reward. So I ate something tasty, I enjoyed something, or I did something good at work, I achieved something. That feeling comes from dopamine, but in order to feel it, you have to bind the dopamine. You have to, these receptors in your brain literally have to bind, you experience, and then COMT, the enzyme, comes along to get rid of that dopamine and bring you back to normal. In between, there's one more gene called MAO, which kind of metabolizes and breaks it down. But the two main, sort of functions are bind, clear. So the interesting thing you're doing is you have the maximum receptors, meaning that you're experientially, it's very easy for you to experience pleasure and reward. So you're constantly kind of in that state from what you're doing, which also makes it seem like things aren't as interesting to you as they are to other people. There's certain people that seek reward and jump in and say, yes, let's do that. And I'll invest in this and I'll do this. And now I'm going to switch to this thing. For you, it's like, I'm not really interested. So outwardly, it appears almost flaky. Like, yeah, we had a meeting. We talked about 10 things and Jennifer only did 2 of them. And she never even started the other 8, right? But those 2 that you did, you're going to do extremely well. You're going to binge on them. You're going to come back with a stack of paper that blows people's minds. Like, how did she do this? We would never dive that deep. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, it does sound familiar. And I will explain this to my husband after the fact. that would solve a lot of arguments.
So what's happening is it's not that you're not interested or you don't care or you're flaky. You literally are getting reward so easily that you already feel like you've done it. Like it's, I thought about it and then I jumped onto Facebook and when I was supposed to be working. Right? So, but the thing that takes you there, that gives you that sense of reward, it's hard for you to let go. You'll stay in that thing. So, five friends can tell you about five different Netflix shows, and you'll say, I'm not interested. But the one that you like, you're going to watch 6 episodes, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
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 So
Yeah.
this is one small trait. Now, if we start to layer other neurochemicals on top of that, and by the way, because you're comped, the enzyme, you have the fast version. So you're kind of diving deep on the things you like, but it doesn't last very long, which means that it allows you to shift gears. So this is why you're functional. You're not a binger that's getting lost, like a scientist that locks himself in a room or herself in a room that doesn't want to talk to anybody. You can come back because the comp is quick enough to bring you back to that outside of reward or pleasure state, which allows you to do what you do. What I doing when I'm doing what I need to do, I'm diving deep, but I can also come right back to whatever the next thing is: parenting, relationship, whatever. Right?
Very
So now
interesting.
we so now we layer on top of that your other neurochemicals, which are optimal, which makes you so good at what you do. So adra2b, your ability to sort of ignore or completely imprint trauma and pain. You have the optimal version, meaning that when it comes to, God forbid, the car accident or the fight or the whatever pain, anxiety, fear inducing moment, you just let go. Meaning that you experience it just like anybody else. You know what happened, you know what it means. But the next time there's a car accident, the next time you drive down that street, it doesn't mean much. To the other person, literally PTSD, right? Car accident, I'm never going on that street again. I can't be in that color car again. If I even hear a bang for the next 6 months, I'm screwed up. For
Wow.
you, does that resonate?
Yeah, it actually explains, a question that I get a lot is I had a very severe accident on a horse right at the beginning of COVID because, we weren't allowed to do anything. So I was always out riding because it was the one thing I could do, obviously without a mask in the middle of a field
Yeah.
by myself. And I fell and I broke my wrist in two places. I broke ribs and my rib punctured my lung. I was in the hospital and it was pretty bad. But pretty much the first opportunity that I had to go riding again, I just and if you look at my Instagram, you can see I'm on a farm pretty much every single day playing with horses
Right.
and, doing all kinds of stuff. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So literally, your genetic capacity doesn't allow you to imprint the feeling, right? So you'll remember the moment, you'll learn from it, but the next time you come back to it, you're coming back to it with the logic, not the feeling. So you'll just make the correction, and you won't make that same mistake again. But it's not like horses are bad,
Right.
right? That's the trauma. So you'd be a great frontline warrior in military. No PTSD at all.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I will, you know what I always said, I probably should have joined the military, but
Yeah.
I have too many, I think, authoritarian issues, for that.
So now we layer on top of that your serotonin. You're also optimal there. You actually have a really unique profile, by the way, cognitively. We don't see this combination often.
Oh,
So your serotonin is also optimal. So now what we spoke of is sort of recall or imprint. How do you remember things? How does it impact you? Serotonin is more in the moment. How do you prioritize? How do you feel? How do you react? And because your serotonin is so optimal, it's very easy for you to deal with all the stimuli around you. So whether somebody frustrates you, shows up late, is chewing their food too loud, none of it bothers you, right? You kind of like, it's almost things that other people are noticing, you don't even know are happening, because that your response to stimuli is so low, only because you're so good at prioritizing things, meaning you can focus, right? You're not irritable, you're not sort of uh, except for the thing when you're in that binging moment. When you're in that binging moment, you get locked in the zone. Don't bug me, right? I'm busy. Right?
I've
Otherwise,
been accused a lot of not noticing certain things
yeah,
about people in general or about situations. And um so that makes a lot of sense. And I guess it's just, to me, it's just not a big deal. So I don't.
it's not so. You're both not only not bringing the emotional intelligence to it, meaning that the recall of last time, it's okay. The pain I've let go, and I'll treat this as a new event. It's not like holding a grudge, right? So you treat it as new every time, right?
Right.
And in the moment, whatever that stimuli is, you can ignore it all, but that also makes you operate at sort of this macro level, right? You may miss the details, but you can think big at a macro level and do things that other people might say, oh, what do you, that's not, you're sort of out of your league. What are you doing?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it's very easy for you to play there because the details don't matter, your big picture. So, but where serotonin is also very helpful is actually in sleep. So you have a greater ability to ignore the sort of stimuli of sun, noise, blanket being pulled, whatever, and sleep through it. So I don't know if you have any sleep problems, but melatonin is your go to sleep chemical, put you to sleep. Serotonin is your wake up chemical, your morning chemical, and you do really well in terms of regulating it. So you don't have, you shouldn't at least have the problem of like people that wake up in the middle of the night and then they toss and turn and then they're stuck.
Yeah. I mean, I think that depends on, what's going on in your life and stress levels and all of that. But, I will say that since I started tracking my sleep, and so is my husband, it's very obvious that we have something is different between the two of us. I typically routinely get, 2 hours of deep sleep, 2 hours of REM, where if he gets 30 minutes of deep sleep, he's lucky,
Oh wow. Yeah.
and, so it's interesting. I'm not saying every night's a great night, but I have way more great nights than I have bad nights.
Yeah, it's a lot easier for you than a normal person because of your serotonin levels,
Hmm,
right?
interesting.
But the last neurochemical we'll talk about, because there's so much other stuff to talk about, is BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So you're also optimal there. And this is why I say your profile is so unique, because in a lot of the sort of mood and behavior type issues, the pathways that lead to them, you're optimal in all of them. So you must be a very pleasant person to be around, right? Uh, for sure. I mean, you would be sort of that rock that people kind of lean on, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
I could see that.
yeah,
It's funny though, because I work by myself so much. I'm not really ever around that many people being,
yeah,
freelance. So,
yeah,
um, but that's really interesting. So
yeah.
what you're saying is people should invite me to their parties.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
That's interesting. So, I'm a huge fan of studying BDNF and raising BDNF levels, whenever possible. So, um, can you talk a little more to the audience about why BDNF is so important?
sure. So its primary purpose is neuroplasticity, so neural connection. And what it's studied and reported in genetics is, you're either good at dealing with concussion or not good at dealing with concussion. It does so much more. But it's true that neuroplasticity is the root solution to concussion. You need to repair, right? And if you do that well, it's harder to get a concussion and you recover faster. But it also speaks to mood and behavior, meaning that sort of drama queen response. So on one end, we said that you don't, uh, imprint the negative stimuli, but even if you did, it wouldn't mean a lot because your BDNF is optimal. So that the person that gets a lawyer letter in the mail and they're just done for the day and they can't function, versus the person that gets a lawyer letter in the mail, they're like, okay, I read it. Now, oh, by the way, I was busy. I already had something else going on. It doesn't mean a lot to them, that drama queen response. So
Mhm.
you're optimal there. So you're likely to just to be able to cope. But again, you fell off a horse, broke bones, punctured your lungs, and you just process it and dealt with it. It's not a weight on your shoulders, right? And
Right.
the other thing it does is because it deals with sort of neural synapse and connection and neuroplasticity, it speaks heavily to your ability to develop skills. And we find that people that are, again, going back to the example of the scientist, the person in the lab that has tunnel vision, that is so good at what they do, and every email from them is 3 pages, right? But tell them to shift gears to doing a podcast, or let's go, work on some technology meeting, or they just can't do it, right? And they'll get frustrated, they can't handle the failure of it, and you're the exact opposite of that. Your BDNF is so optimal, you can easily go from riding a horse to practicing medicine to recording a podcast, to making business deals. You can do multiple things at a sort of masterful level because it's so easy for you to develop new neural connections to learn.
Wow. I teach and talk about learning all the time because it just fascinates me how the brain learns, and how, you have to make memories first to be able to learn. And that all depends on, neural connections and how strong they are, how often you practice recall and all that kind of good stuff. And, um, when I was listening to some of your other podcasts, you had talked about how this is what allows really successful entrepreneurs to do what they do as well, right?
Yeah.
Because they can, especially serial entrepreneurs, and when I heard that, I thought about it and I was like, oh wow, that's me. I have this whole like medical writing business.
Yeah.
I have a whole podcast. I have a whole, I just started writing, books. I just started writing graphic novels, and I'm doing all these different things, and at the same time, you have all these, making sure I, get my exercise in at the farm and being a mom and, and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, so that's why I can do all this stuff. And other people struggle with, just getting up and going to work in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just very easy for you to sort of develop new skills at a high level, not even at a basic level, right? So now the reason, so when we're working with people clinically, we usually look at the brain first. And what we just did in 15 minutes, we can spend another 3 hours on, by the way. We can dive a lot deeper, right? We just surface level, like looked at what do you kind of look like. So by understanding the mind at a genetic level, you then can do everything else much better because now you understand how you perceive things. You understand how you're actually going to get motivated. How, for example, I can't ask you to pursue reward because you don't. Well, I'm not going to give you a daily schedule of things to do because by the third or fourth day, you're not going to do it anymore. Right?
Yes.
But for me, I need that. If I don't get, if like the time that I was supposed to go to the gym, if a friend was late or if, the gym was closed or whatever, I get frustrated. I have to have the schedule, right? Because my dopamine levels are exact opposite of yours. And I sort of, that tick box check, getting the tick box checked, it gives me that satisfaction. So understanding this, whether it's about yourself or about a patient, allows you to better deal with the solutions for yourself or a patient. It's not just here's the things you need to do, but here's how you can do it. And how do you even speak to the person? There's people that we get on calls with that we know the first 10 minutes is just them going to be telling us why our product doesn't work. And we know, guaranteed, that's the first 10 minutes, and we have to let them do it because they're going to find the one thing that is like 2% wrong, and that's all they're going to talk about. And then we have to let them unpack it, and by the end of it, they're the biggest super fan we could have. And this happens with that same profile every time. So now imagine the power of knowing this is how you think and perceive the world, and how much better you can then implement whatever you're trying to implement.
Well, yeah, you can set up, you can almost set up a routine for when you are either meeting somebody new for the first time, starting a new job, right, or the fact that that you're going to have to take on new responsibilities. You can sort of, plan for those responses that are just that you're just wired for.
Yeah, exactly. And we've done this type of work with like athletes, executives, professional athletes that like during clutch time, I just fall apart, and we show them why, right? Oh, mom is asking me for tickets or a new car, and I just can't do it. She doesn't understand. I don't make the kind of money she thinks I make.
Mm-hmm.
You have to teach them how to cope with those things, and it's different for different people. Okay, so now that was the brain. Let's jump to a couple of the red flags that came out.
Yeah, that was the good part, people. Now we're getting into the bad stuff. Here's my flaws.
The area that stuck out, and this is, I mean, it's we're gonna get into what's going on, but the interesting thing about this is a perfect example of the difference between genetics and functional genomics. How do you actually make this actionable? Because in genetics, all I would be telling you now is you can expect an 80% likelihood of having some kind of cardiovascular incident.
Yep.
That's genetics, right? So what do you do with that other than walk away with anxiety? Nothing, right? Because I haven't told you what to do about it, but that's genetics. Is that based on your profile, and actually based on your profile, there's an 80% chance that you're going to have severe cardiovascular issues.
Right.
That's what the numbers say.
And that, goes right in line with the fact that my grandmother died at age 66, very, very young, from, I want to say, her fourth heart attack.
Oh, yeah. And it makes perfect sense when I look at your genetics.
Yep.
Now, functional genomics is why? What's going on that's going to cause, you're not born with heart disease. It's
Right.
not, this is the difference between a genetic condition, sickle cell syndrome. You're born with it. You have it. There's a gene that's mutated, variant version that causes sickle cell, and you have it. You're not born with diabetes, cardiovascular disease, stroke, dementia. These happen 50 plus, and then all of a sudden they progress, and then treatment, or for some people, a really bad outcome, right? So what happened in those 50 years that led to that disease all of a sudden expressing? It was those choices that were mismatched to your genetic legacy. And what are those choices? Environment, the loads you're exposing yourself to, nutrition, and lifestyle. Lifestyle is like exercise, sleep, all the things that you do, and nutrition and environment are obviously the things that you expose yourself to. So now in your case, what we see, there's two big red flags. The heart disease typically doesn't happen in the heart. It usually happens in the arteries around the heart, blockage, calcification, and all of a sudden blood doesn't flow, and then the heart doesn't get enough blood and there's a heart attack.
Right.
So why does that happen here in the arteries? Because some people like yourself have bad hardware, right? So you have, of the arterial structure, the inner lining is called the endothelium. And this is one of the things we talked about that day.
Yes. I love this talk.
Yeah. I was sorry to sort of voodoo this and make the talk.
I know, it was me. Who knew? You're talking about me.
Yeah. But this is the case. But the good news is you're at the age where now that you know this, you can 100% avoid it. Now that you know what to focus on, right?
Right.
So that inner lining, you have a very bad quality version of this. Paper thin, prone to damage. But what does that mean? Why would it get damaged, right?
Right.
So now the other thing we see, another big glaring red flag is, and I almost giggled as I opened this up, which was kind of evil, but because it's so clearly the example we were talking about, and it happened to be you, right? You are literally missing the detox genes. Forget about what version, you don't even have them.
I know. Can you believe that? Like 2 out of the 3, I don't even have them.
You don't have, and these are the main genes that instruct the glutathionization. So glutathionization is take toxins that are in the blood, bind glutathione, send it to the liver to metabolize and get rid of it. Everybody does this. You don't, right? At the gut, the first line of defense of the gut, horrible. In fact, I'm just going to poke and look at one thing. And now, what does that mean? It means that you are chock full of these toxins that are causing that damage to that poor quality endothelial lining. That cellular structure was not designed to deal with that level of sort of toxic insult, right? And now you have the bad quality version of it. So at the lungs, you're actually doing quite well. So your ability to deal with, airborne toxins, chemicals, mold, perfumes, whatever would give somebody like a minor headache or whatever, you don't do that. You do that quite well. Your first line of defense here is good. Once it gets in, you don't handle it well. You don't have any soldiers in the bloodstream getting rid of the stuff. It's just free flowing. Your gut lining, zero capacity. So there's no frontline soldiers there defending you. Whatever you eat that has pesticides, drying agents, any sorts of mold or chemicals, gets right into your blood, and it's probably going to cause inflammatory issues to your gut, which you may have noticed with certain foods. I can't understand, why it's
absolutely.
So
This is so crazy because, I actually did a podcast a couple of weeks ago, just me talking about, why I started my podcast in the first place. And, it had to do with my mother-in-law having colon cancer. But one of the things that I went over was that right after she died from that, I took a good look at myself and I was like, something is wrong with me. And I don't know what it is. And I just happened to watch a podcast with Dr. Gundry, and that's how I found Dave Asprey. And, I was like, and I say at the time, I literally had diarrhea for like 6 months and I did not know why. Like I
Yeah.
couldn't figure it out. Like I've just had gut issues for forever. And until I made some massive dietary changes, it did a 180
Yeah.
just from food.
And this is why. So your gut, literally the detox capacity is zero. It's non-existent. Which, so we're not even talking about what version of the gene do you have, how well do you don't do it. You literally don't have the genetic instruction. So something as simple as bread. Well, guess what? Whereabouts do you live?
I live in Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. So you have a winter, right?
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah. So any of the areas where there's a strong winter, there's usually storage of wheat and grain so that there's enough bread, through the winter. And in order to, for the farming to catch up, and you know this, like you're on a farm, they use drying agents and chemicals to dry the wheat faster so they can get more yield.
Hmm.
That stuff is super toxic, right? That stuff in Europe, it's illegal, by the way. They're not even allowed to use it.
Wow.
So one particular chemical, which is used quite a bit in North America. So that stuff, your gut doesn't have the ability to clear. So not only is it going to cause an inflammatory insult at the gut, which could lead to IBS, Crohn's, irritable bowel syndrome, 6 months of diarrhea,
Yes.
right? Because what happens? Okay, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10, 20, 25 years of that constant exposure that you're not matched to, eventually you cross the threshold where your body gives up. And then it's 6 months of diarrhea, right?
Yep.
And then you have to heal it, not with a pill because you're still causing that inflammatory insult. It's by removing the load that your body can't handle. So at the time you didn't know what was going on, but you intuitively did kind of the right stuff. So now we know your detox profile sucks.
Yes.
So there's stuff for sure in the blood causing this inflammatory insult to this poor endothelial that you have, right? So
Right.
what then does the body do? The body recognizes this inflammation here and it says, that's no good. We're going to send cholesterol as a hormone to reduce that inflammation, which is what your body will start doing. When cholesterol meets toxicity, it hardens and gets deposited, which is what's going to happen if you don't clear that toxicity from your blood. And then you get that buildup of that cholesterolemia, which again, it takes decades and decades and decades. By the time you're 50, your doctor says, well, your cholesterol levels are elevated, and it seems like you might even have a blockage. You need to get on a statin, a Lipitor or some other kind of statin. And we're now masking the symptom, which took you 30, 35, 40 years of wrong choices to get to. All you really need is to support those genetic gaps and holes. But now in your case, guess what? There's another layer. In your case, not only is all this happening, your lipid transport, your ability to move cholesterol around is the worst possible. We very rarely see this, by the way. So in the report, it will tell you high risk of Alzheimer's, dementia, and stroke, right?
Yep. Good old
And
APOE4.
yeah, ApoE4 is, and it's a well-studied gene. It's typically in genetic tests, but again, the genetic test will tell you elevated risk of Alzheimer's. And then the belief is, I just have to wait and see if I get it. And that's where things kind of fall apart, where I can't tell you how many people have been referred to us by friends or whatever and say, you know what, I don't want to take a DNA test because I don't want to know if I'm getting Alzheimer's. Because they actually don't have any idea how, and this is not their fault. Our medical system does a really good job of acute care, solving emergencies.
Completely agree.
Yeah, and that same
Top of the line.
amazing, but that same modality toolkit is applied to chronic disease, where you believe it's the same thing. Where wait for the problem and then mask it. So when a typical genetic test tells someone you got an 80% chance of Alzheimer's, which is what somebody would tell you with your genetic test, it's now like, okay, well, that's most likely, I better start planning, because it's most likely coming. Well, why does the Alzheimer's happen? What does that gene do? What that gene does is lipid transport. So what is happening is there's certain things that can cross the blood-brain barrier. Very few, but certain things, including mutated proteins, frayed amino acids, right? Muscle fiber, that type of thing.
Right.
Which can then, and when they cross the blood-brain barrier, start to interact with healthy tissue, and you all of a sudden get to this sort of state where your brain has been loaded with the wrong stuff, in simple terms,
Right.
and leads to broken neural linkages, etc. So fasting is one simple fix. If you don't have the ammunition in your body, these mutated proteins, frayed amino acids, there's nothing to cause the broken neural linkages, especially with your good BDNF,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you were to fast 2-3 days a week, that would eliminate the ammunition, right?
Right.
If you were to do other things to reduce your toxic load, there's less need for your body to use cholesterol as an anti-inflammatory hormone. So you reduce that ammunition, which is the trigger that leads to the problem. So as opposed to waiting to see, you can now intervene and just prevent it. So this is where we go from, like I said, genetics to, hey, 80%, good luck, to why is it actually, what's the biochemistry? What does that gene actually do? And then now that we know what it does, we can now start to recommend, take this supplement, eat like this, exercise like this. For example, I would tell you, don't do cardiovascular exercise.
That was in the report, and I was a runner. I did triathlons and all that kind of stuff, and I read that and I was like, wow. And so, what's funny is I've actually just been kind of doing more heavy lifting stuff at the farm and just trying to get in my workout from a strength perspective, and I'm actually doing better.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So
cutting out the cardio.
yeah, even just so, first of all, the cardio would add to that inflammatory load, which you don't cope with. Some people, we tell them, yeah, go do it. It's good for you. For you, it's not. And if I even just look at you, I mean, we're going to look at your hormones, but I would predict that you're more androgenized, meaning that there's more testosterone, right? Which also speaks to lifting heavy things, pushing heavy things, and you'll most likely feel better. So that speaks to longevity. Testosterone is what gives you that.
Well, let's talk about that because my profile said I'm balanced, like between the two.
Okay, let's take a look.
And I didn't really understand what that meant. I'm very familiar with, people being either estrogen dominant or androgen dominant, but I didn't really understand the whole balanced profile.
You know what? I can even share this if you want me to show everybody.
Sure.
One sec. The way we look at hormones is in a cascade. And it's very important to look at them that way. And this is why, by the way, most genetic tests don't even include hormones, because for the most part, hormones aren't actionable, meaning that if I just tell you how you deal with progesterone, I haven't really told you much. So let me just share this.
Well, I find this to be very important because I talk to a lot of women about, their hormones and trying to explain. So I think this is really important.
This is huge for, and I would say the place where we probably had the biggest impact is in female hormone health. It's that delta value of it just sucks so bad. The doctor told me it's my hormones. I'm supposed to have problems. To like, there's no need for problems. And
yeah. Don't even get me started. But yeah, so please proceed.
So here's what's happening: is whether you're a man or a woman, you do the same thing. You take cholesterol, you create progesterone. Progesterone converts into testosterone.
Right.
And then testosterone either converts into estrogen, gets cleared as an androgen from this pool, or converts into a DHT.
Right.
So the reason you were told you have sort of a mid-level, first of all, your initial hormone production is not that, the volume is low. So this initial pool of testosterone is low, right?
Okay.
But you're not converting it all into estrogen because you're clearing some of it first. So this is why they called you co-dominant, because if this was a red light here and the rest of the map was the same, red light here, no DHT. DHT, by the way, is the manly man testosterone, where you have a ripped, jacked muscles with all the striations and you look like Superman. Right. That's what DHT it is, but it also kills your hair follicles and gives you prostate problems, right? It's toxic. Right. So for you, what the report is trying to tell you is you make some hormones, not a lot, but you make some. Then before converting them all into estrogen, you get rid of some. So you utilize the testosterone that speaks to your jawline, your sort of more petite frame. It's probably harder for you to put on weight and fat than a typical person. You're closer to like a Kendall Jenner than a Kim Kardashian, right? So Kim would be like mega estrogen, no testosterone, right? Which would give her that shape and figure. And
right.
So this is what we call co-dominance. You're right in the middle, which is a good place to be because you have the testosterone being utilized for sort of longevity, vitality, strength. You have the estrogen for mass, all the feminine hair, skin, quality lining for fertility, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're not producing DHT. If you had DHT, you would look more like this plus the DHT.
Mm-hmm.
You would look like an Olympian. Like we would see every ripple of every muscle, and your six pack, would be
Yeah,
there.
you definitely can't see my muscles, but I put on muscle very easily.
Yeah, you should be able to put on muscle easily and get strong,
Yes.
right?
Yes,
Uh,
but you can't see it.
you can't see the ripples because the
No.
DHT is not there. So now we move forward and look at your estrogen toxicity. This is another big, huge red flag. What we see is in that monthly cycle, you convert uh, the testosterone into estrogen to some degree.
Right.
Before clearing it, you first convert it into 2, 4, or 16 hydroxyestrogen. You have a red light here, which means you don't create the nice one, the good stuff. You create both of the somewhat toxic and the highly toxic estrogen metabolite, which means that, yeah, it's not the best, but again, knowing this early, you can do something about it. If you
Okay.
do know this, and just like the typical American woman, 85% of women spend a long time on the birth control pill. That's more estrogen, leading to more estrogen toxicity. More and more women are starting to take hormone replacement therapy as they age for youthfulness and osteoporosis and various different issues. That's more estrogen, leading to more estrogen toxicity. Why is it that, and we talked about this also when we met in Orlando,
Yes.
was, why is it that so many women at the menopause age get breast cancer? Why does it happen at that time? Right? Why not?
Right.
Why not 16 when they hit puberty, or why not 80? Yes, it does happen at that time, but the huge majority happens during menopause, because menopause is when you stop having a menstrual cycle and getting rid of this stuff. Right?
Okay.
So
Right.
right now you're clearing it. You're getting rid of it every month. There's still some harm being done,
Right.
especially again if you take a birth control pill or eat estrogen dominant foods or have estrogen mimics in your environment. There's things like chemicals and such that mimic estrogen when they enter your body. Now, once you get to menopause and you're no longer clear, your body says, oh, there's this toxic metabolite. I need to keep you safe. So I'm going to go store it in fat.
Right.
Because fat doesn't hurt you. Right?
Right.
Where do women have fat? In their breast, right?
Yeah.
And what happens when you send all this toxicity, and maybe at that age you also start taking hormone therapy because your doctor says you're menopausal and it's a good idea, it's going to keep you young, good for whatever, right?
Right.
That's where that cellular structure that's in the, all the sensitive glands were never meant to deal with this. And why so many women at that age all of a sudden have that inflammatory insult that leads to the cellular damage that leads to cancer formation.
Right. So I find this highly interesting because I've researched a lot on hormones, and I'm hugely about how should I say this? Educating on the Women's Health Initiative studies that came out in the early 90s, where we started finding out what all of this excess estrogen and does in women with or without a uterus, and at what point in their lives, and we started learning about the increased risk of breast cancer, of thrombosis and all this kind of stuff. And so I love that you're now educating women on why this is happening,
Why it happens, exactly.
and why it happens to some women and not others. And to me, now that we have this kind of information available, especially as we enter menopause, I'm my birthday is next week. I turned 47. This is hugely important for me to understand at this point in my life.
Yeah.
But I wish that women would understand this earlier, in their 20s, when they're thinking about taking birth control.
Yeah, and taking it for 5-10 years, which
Yes.
is often the case. So now the woman that's taking birth control pill, it says right on the side of the box that there's somewhat one of the potential risks is increased stroke, increased risk. But why again is it some women get a stroke and some don't?
Right.
Right? From prolonged use, potential risk of stroke, because some women are estrogen toxic, some are not. Some have poor quality endothelial linings, some have poor lipid transport and vasculature of the brain. That's one piece of the puzzle. we're saying that you're already like a sitting duck. You've got the wrong suboptimal profile, but it takes that trigger to push you over the edge, and the trigger happens to be the birth control pill in that case for these various different types of women. Now, when we look at the last step, is there's hormone dominance, what do you produce? Then there's hormone toxicity, what quality is it? Then there's clearance, how do you get rid of it? So there's good and bad news, where the good news is you have your SAW2 and your COMT is fast, the same COMT that clears the dopamine from the brain.
Mhm.
Right? The bad news is, again, you're missing those detox genes,
Right.
right? So you're somewhat in the middle for clearance of this stuff. So what this speaks to is less input. You need less estrogens entering your system, and you also need support in clearance to make sure that the body isn't overwhelmed with toxicity where now it needs to go store it in fat. It can just never, it's cleared through your work of taking the right supplementation.
Right. And so what is that supplementation for people like me?
So here's the funny thing is, I can't tell you how many women we've dealt with that, have heavy metals or some kind of toxic marker in their blood that
Mhm.
go to their naturopath. And you would think, okay, what is detox? It's glutathionization. That's the process.
Right.
So if this person is toxic, why don't I give them glutathione? It makes sense if that's what causes, if that's what detoxes you. But what happens in some of these women, many, they take the glutathione IV at a naturopath office, and then they're knocked out. They're in bed for a month. And then the response to that is, well, yeah, because you have all these toxins that are just now kicking all over the place and making you. No, what's actually happening is you don't have the genetic instruction telling glutathione what to do. You don't have the gene, like you, right? So now glutathione is in your body, yes, binding onto toxins, but also binding onto minerals and nutrients and everything
Mm.
in the bloodstream, and literally putting you in bed. And
Wow.
and so what's needed is the precursors, ingredients that go to work on their own. NAC, selenium, alpha lipoic acid, glycine is a big one. Um, so these are the things where you precision supplementation, supplements are considered safe, which they are. There's no sort of dire consequence, but for some profiles, yeah, it's going to give you an adverse reaction. Like some women will end up in bed because of taking glutathione, which seems harmless.
Wow. So a couple questions here. First of all, this is why offline I told you that if I had not become a biohacker, I'd probably be dead by now. um, I've been taking NAC supplements for 2 years, and I actually recently just started glycine. But I take I take a whole crap load of supplements, every day, depending. But I was taking glutathione. So are you telling me that I should stop that? Is that not helpful at all?
For you, no, it's literally you'll feel better off of it. If you're
Okay.
taking the glycine
Mm-hmm.
and you remove the glutathione, you'll actually feel better.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is like mind blowing to me, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And
wow.
it's mind blowing to us that this information exists, and everyone we talk to is mind blown because it's not provided. So that's our mission, is to get it out there. As we're a research company that has just recently sort of launched commercially.
Yes.
We spent a lot of money doing a lot of research for a number of years, and now we're saying we're ready to get out there. But yeah, that reaction is appropriate because nobody knows this stuff. Nobody hears it.
Well, like you said, we hear, glutathione, 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 we need to ramp up that pathway, provide, well, and so, we talked about NAC, but, what about other things that are part of that pathway, that glutathionization pathway? What are other things that people can take to ramp that up? Vitamin C or, NAD supplements, niacin.
Yeah, so NAD supports cellular health, right? The
Mhm.
other thing that should be considered in combination with dealing with detox and glutathionization is mitochondrial support, which, by the way, you do a really good job. So your cells take in oxygen and nutrition to create energy, and in that process they create oxidants, which are toxic.
Right.
And you do a really good job of getting rid of those oxidants. You have the optimal genes there. So that's the one sort of saving grace in your detox profile. But anything you can do to support the mitochondria allows a cell to be under less stress to support everything else. So this is why some people who, they get COVID and they get super sick and they can't understand why. It's because metabolically they're not healthy. They may not have a labeled disease yet that they're being treated for, but they're just in a metabolically unhealthy state. The cells are under a lot of stress. And that's that period of, I'm not 50 yet, so I don't have diabetes, but
Right.
I'm also, 35 plus, where my cells are under enough load where they're stressed. I just need that something to push me over the edge, and that thing happened to be COVID, right? So that's where I would say uh, you don't need much more in terms of detox, but you do need to consider the other systems, mitochondrial support, methylation and anti-inflammatory. If you can support your methylation pathways, which then support the ability to deal with the inflammation being caused by the toxicity, you're kind of hitting it from all angles. And methylation is like your B complexes, but even there you have to be specific. Do you take a sublingual under the tongue? A simple thing like, did your ancestors eat beef or did they eat goat and lamb? Well, guess what? If they ate goat and lamb, which is true for a lot of ethnicities, then the B12 pill that you swallow, you genetically can't even metabolize, because there's a gene that tells your gut what to do, and what to do. There's some people that need it under the tongue or an IV, and that plus the B complex, B9, etc. So I would say it's like attacking it from multiple angles: the detox, the mitochondrial health, and the methylation or anti-inflammatory response. And that's your like cellular health package. Now all of a sudden your cells are healthy and you're resilient. It's so much easier to cope with all of this stuff.
Absolutely. You know what? I want to go back to something that you said about, the fact that, you need to support all the systems. And what irritates me sometimes is when I hear people who have been told that, this thing that they did over here doesn't really affect their body over here. And to me, that couldn't be more wrong. I mean, everything is connected. Everything in your body is connected. Like you said, because somebody was already at a high load, high toxin load metabolically, it was, not necessarily, it could have, if it wasn't COVID, it would have been something else to push them over the edge, and so I think that that's what people don't realize is, everything that you do affects your whole entire body. It's all connected.
Yeah, and it's all, so you got to think of disease and the symptoms that we complain about. The reason you go to the doctor, something hurts, and then you're trying to figure out what's the cause. That thing is like a spoke out of the central hub of the system failure. You're already doing something wrong. It probably started 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, right? So this
Right.
central hub is that cellular health issue, and it can be different reasons for different people: detox, methylation, mitochondrial health, hormonal health, cellular structure like bad quality endothelial. There's different
Right.
reasons why, right? So now that thing eventually starts to have these spokes of like headache, eczema, you know, uh, gut issues, diarrhea, right? Uh, Possibly a cancer, or that it could always be drilled back down to something central and foundational, which is true like system health. And if you deal with that thing, all of these spokes go away, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's health. That's not symptom masking. That's not reactionary. That's being healthy. Like, you were born healthy. Why not maintain that? And one day you're in the Bahamas and the coconut drops on your head and you die. That's
Right.
that's how it should be, right? You
Yeah.
should die healthy.
Yeah, exactly. So I know we only have a little bit of time left. So I wanted to talk about, the fact that the DNA company itself, you mentioned you started out as a research company, and you've just commercially launched, and doing things like this, for anybody, for the average individual. And you know, as a medical writer and researcher, to me, this is a huge amount of data that you're collecting.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I was working on a project a couple years ago for rosacea, and I happened to find a clinical study report that was drawn up through the usage of the 23andMe data. And it was the authors of the paper talked about how it was groundbreaking for rosacea because they never before had such a large pool of people that they were able to survey about a very specific disease state or affectation who could answer environmental questions, right? And it gave them insight for the first time ever into genotype translating to phenotype.
Right.
And, so like I said, this was a couple of years ago, and that's exactly what I see your whole goal really is
Yep.
telling people, listen, because you have this, combination of genes, you can potentially expect this. And I say potentially because, as we've discussed today, there are things that you can do about it. So I guess my question to you is, as you collect this aggregate, metadata, can you see yourself, trying to educate on a larger level about how to, tell people how to look at biomarkers before they prescribe specific drugs or biomarker, use this as a biomarker, basically.
Yeah. So that is our mission, like exactly you just described it, which is here's the suboptimal profile, here's the condition. In between is environment, nutrition, lifestyle choices. That's the load that takes you from maybe to certainty. Like I got this thing now, right? Those
Right.
choices you made. And what we're saying, like you just expressed, that knowledge is novel. Most clinicians aren't aware. They're aware there's something there, but they don't know what it is, right? So our mission is just, yes, you can go to our website and you can buy a DNA test. You can learn about yourself like you just did. In the background, we're building a database so that every health and wellness business, whether it's, a multi-billion dollar cardiovascular conglomerate to like a mom and pop gym that wants to make a personal training program, we're opening up that API, that technology, so people can plug in, take our insights, and do what they do better. There's a lot of companies that are taking diabetes, for example, and they're making it more technology enabled by putting it through apps and behavioral change, but it's still the same old protocols. It's just technology wrapped around the 1950s protocols. If you can personalize it through genetics, all of a sudden it's not a 7 out of 10 experience. It's 10 out of 10 people get the benefit out of it. And there's no more trial and error. Let me try this thing and this thing and this thing. Oh, finally something worked for me. Why don't you just know up front what you're supposed to do? Your
Yeah.
genetics are already telling you. You just need to read the manual, right? It's like you don't buy a car and first try diesel and then try propane and try gas. You ask them, which gas am I supposed to put in this car? What fuel, right? Because the first two are going to break it.
Right.
So it's the same thing. So that is, in fact, our mission is, yes, we want people to buy tests, learn about themselves, work with our health coaches, make changes. But the big mission is with this database, anyone that's in the health and wellness business should be able to tap into it and make what they do better and personalize so that it's not only us helping people, but there's all these tentacles of other people helping people in this way. That's what we're trying to do.
Wow. That's amazing. I just can't even wrap my head around the kind of data that you're going to have access to, over the next 5, 10, 20 years. For right now, can you explain to people like the different options they have when they come to the DNA company in terms of, services that you
Yeah,
provide?
sure. So it starts with the test, right? So there's the test is sitting there on the website. It's the main product. And from there, what we're doing is saying that, often there's people that have a test that want to learn about themselves, right? And that's fine. There's people for the most part that have a pain point. I need to lose weight. My mother had breast cancer. I don't know why I keep getting these headaches. Those people typically need guidance and coaching. So we've built these coaching programs to say that, well, if everything else you've tried has failed you, it's because the modality is wrong. You don't just go to the doctor once every 6 months. It's all the in between,
Right.
all the habits and how you eat and how we need to work with you on that stuff. So we've built these coaching programs that are driven by the genetic insights. We know what you need to change. The red flags are there. And it's not about masking the symptom. It's about finding out what you're doing wrong at the genetic level. And then we work with you for a number of weeks to get those things better. And it's, from we have self-serve digital programs all the way up to multi-$1,000 biohacker level programs for people that want to dive super deep. And that's probably the most important part is now what do I do with this information?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And beyond that, because we have the algorithms that sort of populate the reports, we know what we recommend to people. We're starting to curate those things. And we've built this unique marketplace. Think about if you went to Amazon and Amazon had your DNA and they're only recommending to you what you actually needed.
That would be amazing.
Yeah,
That would save me a lot of money.
Yeah, so we've built that, and it's launching in about a month and a half.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, sign me up.
Yeah,
I need some help.
Yeah.
It's funny because I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my report until I got it. And now that I see, I definitely know that now that I need coaching moving forward, to make sure that, I am doing the correct things. The glutathione thing is still blowing my mind. I got to be honest with you. But now look, think about how much money I'm going to save not buying liposomal glutathione anymore.
Yeah,
Knowing that it doesn't do anything for me.
yeah, and it's doing something. You're just getting 10-20% of the benefit and also causing damage at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. So this is just, I think that what you're doing, Kashif, is going to transform healthcare as we know it in the future.
Yep, I agree.
This
That's our
single
mission.
thing.
Yep, that's our mission. Thank you for saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. If anybody wants to look you up, what are your handles? What are the best place to find you?
So it's the DNA Company is the website, thednacompany.com. My personal Instagram is Kash Khan Official, so KASHKHAN Official. And from there, you can find the podcast if you want to learn more. That may be a good place for people to start. Go listen to a couple episodes to hear actual stories of things we've done for people.
Yeah,
there's more
it's
coming.
amazing. It's amazing. And your podcast is called Unpilled, correct?
Unpilled, yeah.
Unpilled, and they can also watch it on YouTube as well.
Right, correct.
Yep. Yeah.
And our corporate Instagram is the DNA Co.
The DNA code.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So
All right. Make sure I capture all that stuff in the show notes. But
sure.
all right. Well, I'll leave you with a parting thank you. When I saw that I was missing 2 out of the 3 detox genes, one of the recommendations in the report, which I adhered to, was stop drinking alcohol and do not ever drink again.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, okay. That was that.
Yeah.
So,
and it's hard for some people to change, but you're a binger, so when you like something, you'll do it, right?
yes, exactly right. So, all right, great. Well, it has been a fantastically enlightening chat with you,
That
Kesh.
was awesome.
This was more than I could have hoped for and expected. And everybody, if you want to see more interviews like this, head over to Kash's podcast, Unpilled. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.